Welcome in, everyone. I'm meteorologist Kayla Smith, and thank you for joining me for another edition of WeatherFirst Plus on the Road. It is a new year, but it's still the same winter, and this winter has been a cold one so far here in Western New York, to the surprise of no one. But our high temperatures for the first half of December were not just below average, but many of those temperatures were even below freezing, with wind chills even colder. And in temperatures this cold, you're still bound to see people, a handful of people who are outside without the proper warming gear, maybe even walking around in a pair of shorts when it's 25 degrees out. Now, we all know that we're supposed to be bundling up for the cold, but that bundling is for more than just our comfort. There are risks that come with skipping on the hats, gloves, and heavy coats, and in this special, we're going to talk about those risks. And first up, we will talk about frostbite. Now, when our bodies get cold, our blood vessels contract in an attempt to keep us warm. This reduces blood flow and oxygen to our extremities as our bodies work to keep our vital organs protected over all else. This is when frostbite strikes. So your fingertips, your toes, your ears, and your nose are most at risk since they are farthest away from those organs. Frostbite can occur anywhere on the body, though. You could see it pop up on a leg, you could see it on an elbow, you could see it on your cheeks as well. But your extremities are going to be most at risk. Now, there are 3 stages of frostbite, and the first is frost nip, which begins with a prickling feeling or a numbness, and your skin may start to turn a bright pink or a red color. And frost nip won't cause permanent skin damage if the affected area is warmed soon enough. Once the skin starts to become discolored and blistered, superficial frostbite has set in, and that will require medical attention. If the frostbite continues, then it will reach deep frostbite, where all feeling in the affected area is lost as the tissue dies. And at that point, it is imperative that you get in to see a medical professional. Temperatures need to be at or below freezing in order for frostbite to be able to occur, and that's air temperature or wind chill temperature. And obviously, the colder it is, the faster you can get frostbite. Windy conditions can speed up the process of frostbite as the wind strips away the layer of warmth that hovers just above your skin from your internal body heat. Now, this wind chill chart from the National Weather Service highlights how quickly you can get frostbite in cold temperatures as winds increase. So on a 40-degree day with winds at 15 to 20 miles per hour, that puts the wind chill below freezing and puts you at risk for frostbite with prolonged outdoor exposure. While we don't have recorded data of wind chill values, we can talk about some of the cold air temperatures that have been recorded in Rochester over the years. The lowest temperature ever recorded in the city of Rochester was negative 22 degrees. That was back in February of 1934. Last year, on January 22nd, 2025, Rochester recorded a low temperature of just negative 2 degrees. And also this winter, we've had a couple days where our wind chill values have gotten into the negatives. For example, on December 8th, Rochester hit a minimum wind chill of negative 3 degrees. The air temperature was at 4 degrees with a light westerly wind at just 3 miles per hour. And this highlights something that I stress constantly. When your temperatures are extremely cold, it doesn't take much to develop a wind chill, a significant wind chill at that. Now let's talk about hypothermia. You may know that the average internal body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, when that temperature falls below 95 degrees, hypothermia occurs. And during hypothermia, your body is losing heat faster than it can produce it. So your organs will start to lose their functionality, and if left untreated, hypothermia can lead to death. The warning signs of hypothermia include shivering, slurred speech, slow or shallow breathing, a weak pulse, confusion, lack of coordination, or even loss of consciousness. And the confusion part is tricky, as this can reduce a person's awareness of being hypothermic. So if you notice any of these symptoms in someone, call 911 as soon as possible and make attempts to get the person warm, such as carefully bringing them indoors and wrapping them with blankets. Both hypothermia and frostbite can be accelerated by wet or damp clothing, because water helps to cool our bodies, hence why we sweat and why we go swimming in the summer. But being wet in below freezing temperatures can be detrimental. This is why snow boots and other waterproof clothing are so important in the wintertime. They help to keep us dry even when we're trudging through snow. To learn more about these conditions and their prevalence in our area, I took a trip to Highland Hospital to speak with Dr. Andrew Knapp. I am joined here with Dr. Andrew Knapp, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about frostbite and hypothermia. So first we'll start with frostbite, Andy. And is that something that you see commonly here? Like, how often do you see people getting admitted for that?
Yeah, well, thanks for stopping by, Kayla. An increasingly relevant topic as we get into the colder months. We have already seen a couple cases of cold injury, concern for frostbite, and even needed to transfer people over to see a plastic surgeon or burn surgeon for this. That will only increase as the season goes on. When we get into our deeper, colder months, we're talking 20 degrees, teens, heavy wind chills. We're going to see several cases this season that will require tissue loss or amputation even.
Right, and so that leads into my next question. When it comes to that frost nip, that first sign of it, does that need medical intervention?
Yeah, good question. I think, most of us that have grown up in Western New York or cold climates, we've had frost nip before, or even stage 1 frostbite, and, it doesn't really strike a chord. You come in from the cold, you got burning on your nose, burning on your ears, fingertips, maybe they're kind of stiff and full feeling, decreased sensation. But that comes back before you'd even really get to action to going into the doctor or the hospital generally. Your sensation comes back, that burning starts to go away as it warms up, and there really aren't specific medical interventions in terms of medicines or hospital care, but just generally speaking, you need to stay out of the cold. Your day outside's over, so if it was a long Bills game day, you were skiing, snowmobiling, once you get to that point of a bright red tip of the nose, losing sensation on it, firm to touch, you need to retire for the day. In addition to that, when we're talking fingers, feet, toes, rewarming is recommended, and there's a couple specific ways that we want you to do that. Rubbing friction, like we see in movies and talk about, trying to warm yourself up, is actually really not good for frostbite injury when we're on the more severe end of the spectrum. That friction can actually kind of damage the tissue. So we recommend warm water bath immersion. So we're talking hot tub temperature, 100, 101, 102, and about 30 minutes of just immersion in still or moving water. You don't want that too hot. That can also cause thermal injury. But think of like hot tub temperature is just right. So, with frost nip for stage 1 frostbite, we're really looking to have you retire inside and gently rewarm.
Now, when it comes to going into superficial frostbite and deep frostbite, what types of medical intervention at that point would be necessary?
Yeah, this is really dependent on how the limb appears and how the blood flow is to it. And I say limb because most of what we're seeing is fingers, toes, tip of the nose, you're farthest away from circulation or maybe most exposed. When it gets severe, and we're talking dark discoloration, almost dead-looking tissue, we may be talking more on the spectrum of surgical therapies, so eventual debridement or even amputation, which is admittedly rare. But even before that, when you present within the first 24 hours, which we really want to see you early with these kind of injuries, there are medicines, specifically anti-inflammatory drugs and IV therapies, even things like clot busters that we may use for strokes, sometimes have an application in frostbite injury to try and get blood flow back into that tissue. It is largely a salvageable process until it's really quite progressed. And that's not something that strikes you right away. This is really a gradual process depending on how cold it is, how exposed, how wet, how much airflow. But there are a lot of salvage therapies for cold injury.
So as is anything with most medical treatments, you want to try to get in sooner rather than later, because the more you wait, the more likely it is that something is going to be worse.
Sure, and we'll see that our therapies just work less over time as that injury progresses and we don't have that early opportunity to get blood flow back into the extremity or interrupt the inflammation that proceeds from it.
Gotcha. So at what point in the frostbite do people realize that they should probably go and see a doctor?
Yeah, the signs that I want people looking out for really are blistering. That's an automatic come to the hospital. Dark discoloration, so normally we see bright red tissues, the tip of the nose, tip of the ears. We've all seen that. When that starts to get pale and stay pale, or dark purple or black, we've got a problem and we need you to come in and be seen. Similarly, we talk about that numbness that you get when you're out in the cold for too long, you can't really feel it. If that sensation's not coming back as you're rewarming, we need to see you.
Gotcha.
And even more so if it's getting swollen out of proportion and not improving when you go inside, that's when we want you in.
All right, and now kind of tying this into hypothermia, do you see sometimes, is it possible for frostbite and hypothermia to be happening simultaneously?
This really kind of depends on the population and how prepared you are, but in the worst of circumstances, they often will coexist. Somebody in an unexpected circumstance where they're trapped somewhere with exposed and underdressed, you can have them coexist. But they can also happen independent of one another. You can have hypothermia without having frostbite and vice versa.
And do you often get people in for hypothermia? I'm sure that's something that you see spiking at this time of year.
Unfortunately we will, and it tends to be in our more incapacitated populations. So you think of, maybe your grandma who walked out to get the mail and slipped and fell and couldn't call for help, or intoxication, or sometimes physical debility that leads you in a position where you can't get yourself out of a cold environment. And that tends to set in a little more gradually in somebody who can't move themselves to a safer environment and start to warm themselves up.
Yeah, and I think that intoxication thing is important to touch on, because a lot of people think that because when you're drinking, it makes you feel warmer,
Sure.
So you don't necessarily realize
Sure.
that you're actually much colder.
The whiskey blanket, if we will.
Yes, exactly. So it's definitely super important for people to be aware of that. Now, what type of medical treatments are done for the hypothermia?
It really depends on the degree of severity. In most of the cases we're going to see it's non-invasive measures, so warm fluids, warm environment. We have some specialized warming blankets that we put over people, and rarely does it progress to internal invasive rewarming measures, but we have those when somebody is in critical illness from it.
And what are some of the risk factors for hypothermia and frostbite? We talked a little bit about, an older population who can't necessarily move themselves back inside. We talked about intoxicated people.
Yeah.
Are there other groups of people that should maybe be on higher alert?
Yeah, certainly, our unhoused population tends to be a big component of what we see in the frostbite realm. Substance use disorders, but among, just medical comorbidities, so people with vascular disease, poor perfusion to their hands and legs, smoking, cardiac disease, lung disease, may be a little more vulnerable. And we can imagine a situation where somebody's taking a simple walk, they're walking their dog, they're going out to get the mail, to move their garbage can, and all of those increase the amount of stress that your body sees in a cold environment, and maybe you're less likely to be able to rescue yourself if you do have a slip and fall and a physical injury from it.
So going off of that, what are some of the precautions that people can take, before any of this happens to protect themselves from it happening?
Yeah, I'd say just generally speaking, traveling on a cold day in the wintertime, I want people to have hats in their cars, gloves in their cars, a winter coat. This time of year you may leave for work and it's 40 degrees. You come home and it's 20 degrees and you weren't prepared for that environment. Optimally keep your gas tank full. Keep your cell phone on with you and charged if you can. Just sort of self-rescue measures, because what we're really looking to plan for is the unexpected. A car crash, the highway shut down, a big storm where you're stuck and can't move, and you don't want your car running out of gas and not being able to call for help. So In addition to that, I'd say, of our more frail population, this is a time of year to think about, do I need to go out and get the mail today? It's a blizzard out, the wind is strong. Can I just let that sit? Can I miss garbage week this week? Is there a neighbor or friend who'd be willing to bring that in for me so that I don't put myself in harm's way?
Yeah, I think that's really important, and keeping that community around you to be able to not only ask people for help, but to check up on people who might be of that higher risk.
No doubt.
Just making sure that everybody around you is safe and warm. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew
my pleasure,
Knapp, for
Kayla.
talking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you likewise.
Thank you again to Dr. Andrew Knapp for providing us that insight on frostbite and hypothermia. As he mentioned, we still have a long winter ahead of us here in Rochester. And it's never too late to start taking the necessary precautions to keep yourself safe in cold weather. You heard Dr. Knapp talking about some of those things you can do to help prevent hypothermia or frostbite. Also consider wearing hats, gloves, or mittens, and maybe even an extra pair of socks to keep yourself protected. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of On the Road. I'll see you next time.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.